Hello, we'll wait for everyone to trickle on in. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Aria Mormon. I use she, her, mom pronouns, and I am the lead project manager for the Aging Disabilities Veteran Services Community Services Division of Multnomah County. And I'm joined here today with several of my colleagues. I will have Lynn provide an introduction, and then Barry, and then Lucas, and then Marina, who will be helping us to present contracting with Multco today.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Lynn Shemmer-Ballou. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a program manager with Multnomah County Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services, the community services team, and I oversee many of the programs that are part of this proposal that we will be talking about. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Barry Zimmerman. I use he, him pronouns. I am the county's deputy purchasing manager, and I will primarily be focusing on access to our systems and talking a little bit about the procurement process. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Marina Kalina. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm a senior manager of the community services programs. And I will be talking about panel that will be reviewing the evaluation application panel and answering your questions about the panel recruitment.
Thank you so much to our lovely speakers that will be helping us to learn more about contracting with Multco. It's now 3 minutes after 11, and we're going to go ahead and get started with today's fun and interesting information. So for today's agenda, just to give an overview of what we'll be chatting about today, we will be doing more so of an interactive chat welcome, so that we can have more time to receive all of the information that will help us. We'll have a message from leadership. We'll make sure to overview some of the key terms so that that is clear. And then we will dive into more information about the community services RFPQ, the background behind it. As long as we understand its evolution, we can know where we're going. We'll talk about the technical qualifications, also looking at Multco Marketplace as it relates to the technical qualifications, sourcing events descriptions, and then process relations as it relates to technical qualifications, as well as looking at a procurement overview within that role specifically, talking about the qualifying categories, and as well as looking at evaluator criteria and questions criteria as well, because we need to understand how to upload to the MMP, which is our Multco Marketplace, as well as looking at how to contract with Multco and looking at that contracting timeline and seeing what are the insurance requirements. And then we'll go ahead and cap it off with questions and answers. So let's go ahead and get started with today's agenda. On behalf of Multco, Aging Disabilities Veteran Services Division, Community Services, we would like to welcome all of you to our Contracting with Multco workshop. At this time, we want to give everybody an opportunity to insert into the Zoom chat your name, your pronouns, and your organization that you are representing today. And we would love to send you a thank you for attending our workshop today. And with that, we'll go ahead and go into a welcome message from our leadership. Our leader that we have to support us today is, Irma Jimenez. Thank you, Irma.
Thanks, Aria. Good morning. My name is Irma Jimenez. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Division Director for Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services, also known as ADVSD. Thank you for being here with us today. We'll just do a quick introduction and then pass it on to our presenters for today. If your agency provides services to older adults, family caregivers, and adults with disabilities in your community, and you are interested in learning more about how to partner and contract with ADVSD, then you're in the correct workshop. At Multnomah County, we are continuously committed to examining the ways our policies, procedures, practices, and organizational culture contribute to injustice and institutional racism, as well as opportunities for fairness, inclusion, belonging, and community well-being for all. Our goal is to use strategies to target resources that are culturally responsive and appropriate to our communities most negatively impacted by systemic racism and health inequities, and to advance positive outcomes for all of our residents. Services that your organization may qualify for funding through ADVSD includes case management, family caregiver support, nutrition services, both congregate meals and home delivered meals, health promotion activities, and providing information, referrals, support, and connection to services or service coordination. The ADVSD Community Service Team is looking forward to providing information on contracting with us and answering your questions today. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much for that welcome message, Irma. And Irma is our division director for ADVSD. And I did update that link for all of those internal employees that are looking to join us today. So apologies for that. Let's go ahead and dive into our key terms. So for our key terms today, we have the RFPQ, which is our request for programmatic qualifications, Mega RFPQ, which is our nickname for the funding event, which is the Community Services for Older Adults. MMP, which is Multco Marketplace, the county's e-procurement system, our electronic procurement system. Sourcing events, MMP term for competitive procurements. Supplier, which is our MMP term for individuals or businesses wanting to participate in sourcing events. Buyer attachment, documents in the RFPQ that provide instructions or are required to be completed by the supplier. And those would be our key terms that we will be referencing today. Now we will talk about the Community Services RFPQ background. As many of you might be aware that our current contractors in March of 2020, a few of our colleagues submitted a RFPQ project charter with the intentional work to ensure that we could simplify the RFPQ application process and ensure that funding is expended each fiscal year. A major philosophy of our OAA is that preventative and supportive services will help older people to maintain their independence, and this should be available to all older persons and their families. Let's dive a little bit deeper into what it is that our project timeline entails as far as where we started in our evolution to where we are right now. We will have Lynn provide that information.
Thanks, Aria. So this slide provides just a little bit of background about where we've been, and then the next slide will be about where we're going. So in 2011, we had our district senior center contracts based throughout Multnomah County, providing Oregon Project Independence, health promotion. We had our nutrition providers, and we had about 10% of our budget that was going to culturally specific providers. This was kind of us dipping our toe in the water and kind of starting to expand our contracts and see how the impact of having cultural specific providers, how that would help with our service delivery. Things went well. It was a good experiment. We became more intentional in 2017 with our last round of going out for bid through the RFPQ process. And we engaged in some community sessions, listening sessions, and a work group that was tasked at looking at our funding distribution and ways that we could be more intentional and have a deeper impact with culturally specific organizations, which got us to the current allocation that we continue to lead with, which is that 38% of our funding is designated for organizations that are culturally specific. through both the Older Americans Act funding, nutrition funding, health promotion funding, Oregon Project Independence. We lead with that 38% going for culturally specific organizations. Moving to the next slide. And so this kind of again shows that evolution. Contracts in 2018 were fully executed for culturally specific and our culturally responsive organizations. We've been operating within those contracts for the past several years. Our district centers throughout Multnomah County and the 5 regions continue to serve as a community focal point. Our enhancing equity or culturally specific contractors continue to provide an array of services based on the needs of their community and how they engage in contract with us, and we are serving through those contracts racial and ethnic specific groups. And now looking to the future, as we are right now planning for the release of the next RFPQ, learning, using all of the learning that we had through this past 5 years and through the last RFPQ process, hearing feedback over these years after the last RFPQ closed and across the last several years, listening to that feedback, how the county is changing, how the Department of County Human Services is changing, leading with race, all of those aspects. And again, with the focus on wanting to reduce barriers and make this a very accessible process in engaging, submitting an RFPQ, and hopefully contracting with Multnomah County next year. Let's head to the next slide.
Thank you so much for that information, Lynn, regarding our evolution in contracting with Multco. At this time, we will have our technical qualifications that will be provided by our friend, Barry Zimmerman.
Hi, welcome again. Okay.
Thank you, Barry.
So I apologize for that. And again, thank you all for your time. I know you're all very, very busy and I hope you can really take some value out of this. We shared a lot of technical terms with you. Just my open disclaimer, it's real easy for me to jump into procurement ease. So I'm not sure if you can translate that because I make up words. But if I do, please throw a question in the chat and I'll try to answer anything that I may say that is maybe not a common term for everyone. What I'm showing you right now is a public webpage that we have that shows the Multnomah County's bid and proposal opportunities. These websites that we have are really set up to provide information to anyone wanting to do business with the county. They're set up for a lot of self-help activities, which I know some people really like to do, but also just understand that there's always a voice available on the other end of a phone if you actually need assistance. And I'll show you where you can navigate our web pages and find our contact information.
Barry, can you zoom in for me, please? Just a little bit. Thank you.
How's that?
Awesome. And just to give an overview of what information Barry is going to share as it relates to technical qualifications, Barry is going to talk about the county webpage resources, registering as a supplier in Multco Marketplace, and what a successful RFPQ looks like.
Great.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you. So starting at the very top, so we do have some links that will take you into some videos and some guides that will walk you through step by step on how to access the sourcing events or the RFP or the RFPQs that you wish to participate in. The key item on this page for those of you who have not already registered in our Multco Marketplace system is getting you into access our system. Access in Multco Marketplace is going to allow you to participate in any of the RFPQs or RFPs or any other sourcing events that you may choose to access. The primary link for that is this Multco Marketplace supplier portal here. Let me see how well this works up if I change screens on you, if it lets me. For those of you that have registered, you should save this link and you should absolutely access the supplier portal through this link using a password and login that you create and set up the first time that you register in the system. if you have multiple parties in your organization that would like to access Multco Marketplace, understand that it's one password and login for each organization, and you will have to determine how you will share that password and login in your group. So I highly recommend setting up a generic email password so you can access it. For those of you that haven't accessed, it's a very, very simple form. We're going to ask you for some very simple things like what is the name of your company, what is your tax ID number or social security number, address, how we contact you, very, very basic information at the front end of this. Once you're in, we go through a process to determine that you don't already have a profile in our system. And if you do, then we'll work with you to kind of direct you to where you can find that password and login, or who the person in your agency is that's in charge of that information. If you don't, we will set you up with that supplier registration. We will communicate back some additional tools that will help you navigate into Marketplace and how to set up your system in there, different information you can add. One of the key things being what we call a commodity code. And what that commodity code does is it identifies at a very, very high level what type of business you do. So whether you're a consultant, whether you provide a goods or services, you would select that. And a key feature for that is as sourcing events are opened to the public, that commodity code will automatically notify you that there's an opportunity with the county that you can participate in. Back up a page. So registering in Marketplace, very, very simple. I will be showing you a link later to where you can ask questions if for some reason you're registering and you run into a little bit of a hiccup, or you have questions about something, where we can get you a staff person who will navigate you through that process. Whether or not you navigate in the or whether or not you register in Marketplace, you can always go in and view open events. So even today, you could go onto this web page and it will show you a snapshot of items that we have open. So you can see we have a handful of procurements open right now. What you can do for you to be able to go in and actually read through the procurement document, you do have to have that login and registration. But if you want to just view a very high level summary of what that procurement process is, you can click on view as a PDF and it will show you here's what we're looking to purchase, an overview of who the county is, and then always a point of contact information if you have more questions about that sourcing event. One of the things I like to show potential suppliers or potential businesses is to go in and look at contracts that we've already awarded or sourcing events that we've already awarded. And this is really, really good information because you can start to look at documents that will provide detail on who actually won the sourcing event, how scores were tabulated, how bidding documents were done. These are great resources if you have not previously participated in an RFP or a bid process or an RFPQ process. It's a good way to go in and see how other agencies may have responded and kind of get a feel for how the county evaluates and selects either winners or qualifiers for that. One of the other links that I will show you when we get into the context has a little bit more to do with public records requests. And I always highly recommend that the public records request is a free and open process. You can contact county central purchasing and ask to see previous procurements that have been done. So when we come out with this next this mega RFPQ, and if you want to get a little more information on the RFPQ that we had previously done, you can reach out to central purchasing, request to get those documents. And like I said, it's a good way to look and see what we'd asked 4 or 5 years ago, see how people responded, see the questions that were asked, and give you a general feel for maybe how to put together your own RFPQ responses. I'm going to do a quick link over here where we jump over to how to do business with the county. This has many of our resources across the board on all of the things the county purchases. A lot of them.
Sure to zoom in. Thank you so much for zooming in. Really appreciate it.
This is a little different than Google. It doesn't stay exactly how we've done. So This buyer link right here is going to link you to all of the buyers that we have in central purchasing, which is the office that I'm in. Let me see if this will work for us. Hey, it stayed big. So you have my information. My door's always open. If for any reason after this training is done, you have questions you hadn't thought of, or I didn't explain something clear enough, feel free to contact me either through email or you can call me. And then you'll see we have a whole bunch of other contact information for all the folks in our office. Our senior procurement analysts will primarily be the folks who are working on the sourcing events. So these are the ones that you'll see when you're on that bid and proposal page. You'll see a lot of their information and what procurements they're working with. Throughout here, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in here because there's a lot of information in here. When you get into a sourcing event and you're reading through the descriptions of what we're buying, or if there's references to administrative procedures, a lot of those administrative procedures that in detail will be located via a web link out of the sourcing event. So this is where you would come in and find that information. So if it did reference the PCRB rules or in, you know, our sustainability requirements or things like that, there would always be a link back to these web pages that you could refer to, read through them, and then, like I said, if you have questions still, you could reach out to the senior procurement analyst that's running the sourcing event. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. I think I'm done with this page. I do want to pause just in case anyone had any questions about that website.
And we do have a section dedicated as well if you do have more questions later that come to mind that you would like to ask. We can also discuss those then as well.
Thank you. So Lucas will talk a little bit more when he gets to his section in contracting about what happens in your supplier profile after you've gone through the RFPQ event. And if you're selected as a qualifier or a winner, we then ask you for a little bit more information, and that's primarily so we can make payment to you, any tax requirements the county has, a lot of the financial information that we need. We ask for that after you've been selected or qualified, and you're going to get a contract. We tend to not ask for that information up front because we'd like to keep your information secure and as private as possible. And if you're not going into a contract, and we do not need that for you to be registered as a supplier in the system or to participate in a sourcing event. I did touch on a couple of things about a successful RFPQ, but I'll add a few more items here. So I do highly encourage that you do the public records request to get that information so you can see what we've previously done in the county. That, like I said, it's a good starting spot. You can even ask for the existing contracts that we have with those suppliers, and you can take a look at what a contract would look like. All of that is public record. Ask for it. Read through it, ask us questions, and we're happy to help with that. Other things that will really make you successful in an RFPQ is read the document. I cannot stress this enough. It seems very, very simple. There's a lot of detail in an RFPQ. There's a lot of legalese that we put in there. There's a lot of references to other documents. And you really do have to take time and go through each one of those pieces to make sure that you fully understand what the county's asking you for. I highly recommend doing something like printing out the document, going through it, and anywhere that it says a supplier should or a proposer should, take a highlight pen and just start highlighting those, and then make yourself a little bit of a checklist of where you go through it and say, did I do it? Did I do it? Did I do it? And just to confirm that those are the items that you need to submit. We referenced buyer attachments in our key terms. There will always be a set of buyer attachments that are either the questions that are going to be asked of you, or additional documents that may need to be completed and returned as part of the packet for the RFPQ. So read through all of the buyer attachments, and ensure that you understand them clearly in what the county's asking of you. At any point in the process of completing the RFPQ, ask questions. We love to make sure that the documents that we put out are clear and they make sense to everyone. But we are always looking at that from the lens of a public procurement person. We know what we're writing. Doesn't always mean that that message is being received as well as we'd like on the other end. So at any point in time, if something's not clear, we highly encourage you ask us. We want you to be successful. We want every supplier out there to have an opportunity at business that we do with the county. We want nothing to be restrictive in any way. And a lot of times, unless you provide us that feedback, we won't know that there's something in that document that we haven't made as clear as we possibly can. So never think that asking a question is a bad thing. It is a wonderful thing, and we encourage it 100%. Last thing that I would say, last couple of things I would say is when you believe you've got your documents are ready, you've answered the questions as to the best of your ability. If you're ready to submit that document into Marketplace, have somebody else look at it. Sometimes we get too close to our own work and we think it's a really, really good document. And we may miss simple things like not spelling something correctly, putting punctuation in the wrong place, cutting and pasting something in from another document that maybe doesn't read as well as we thought it would. So have a second set of eyes, look at whatever you're going to submit, make sure it makes sense to them. If they're reading it, they can read through it, and the questions that are being answered, you've answered them in a way that would make sense to anybody reading it. Also, we put deadlines, and deadlines in a sourcing event are probably the one thing that gets our proposers or suppliers in trouble the most. If you miss a deadline on submission, it's an electronic system and it shuts it down. If it says 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. It's not 4:01. At the point that you've missed that electronic deadline, we cannot accept your proposals or bids. And that's kind of like out of all the rules we have, that may be the one hard and fast rule that we can't bend. So do not wait. If you're waiting till the last day to submit that bid or proposal, do it early. With an electronic system, there's always that opportunity for it to go down, or your internet to go down, or some reason why things aren't transmitting as well as they should. We will always have somebody in central purchasing standing by to assist right up until the last minute. But what we can't assist with is if you start your process 15 minutes before the closing time and you're having issues, at that point in time, we can't submit them for you. So give yourself plenty of time, do it early. We'll talk a little bit about Marketplace, how you can ensure that you're have submitted everything correctly. But yeah, that's the one thing that I like to say. Read the document and make sure you get it done on time, and ask questions. All right, I think if we can jump over to the next.
So now we'll have questions. If you all have questions regarding the information that Barry presented, please do go to our chat and drop it in our chat. The information that you just received was regarding the evolution of our contracts from Lynn. You also received our technical qualifications regarding Multco Marketplace as relates to our county webpage resources, registering as a supplier in Multco Marketplace, and what a successful RFPQ looks like. Barry just provided an overview of sourcing events descriptions, the differences between an RFP versus an RFPQ, as well as provided information on submission. And then also touched a brief bit on the process relations when dealing and interacting with the county during the RFQ process, understanding the Q&A board, the MMP messaging system, as well as looking at pre-proposal process, as well as evaluation qualification process, and the notification of outcome, protest, and debrief, which if you have any additional questions regarding that, now is the time to add it to the chat. And if it comes up later, please do send us an email. We will have one of our colleagues at this time place the email to our community services RFPQ in the chat. Feel free to send us an email if you have a question. And at this time, after everyone has submitted their questions, I'll go ahead and take a look in the chat and see if there's anything that can be answered. Give me one moment. Can you please go over the process for asking questions and then how are questions answered and responded to?
Absolutely. So a couple of different ways. Right now, before the procurement starts, you can ask questions via regular email or phone calls. You can have any discussions that you'd like with anybody in the county about the RFPQ. At the point in time that we go live with the RFPQ, communication shift over to just being with the senior procurement analyst assigned to that RFPQ. And you have a couple of ways you can communicate with them. One is in the marketplace system, inside that sourcing event, there's a system called Q&A, and it's literally just an email system within marketplace that's specific to that sourcing event. So any communications that you have with the senior procurement analyst or with the county in the Q&A board is specific to that sourcing event, and it's all contained there. So you will ask your questions through that portal, and the senior procurement analyst will respond to them there. You will also have an opportunity. In most cases, we do what's called a pre-proposal meeting, and sometime usually within about a week or two after that sourcing event's opened, we will have a public meeting, usually virtual now, where we'll invite you in. We will have our program folks there. The program folks will describe the work that they're wanting to have done. They will go into detail about the specifics of the work, and then you'll have a procurement person there who will talk to you specifically about the documents that that are related to this sourcing event. So you can ask in-person questions. If there's questions that need to be replied to specific to the group, we will almost always ask to have those put in writing, and then we will send that out through the Q&A board what those responses are. You also have two other time periods during that sourcing event where if you feel like the sourcing event is not is some way restrictive, or the language in it or the services that we're asking for are not in line with kind of what the normal business processes are in the world, you have ability to what we call a protest. So there's a protest of specifications where you can say, hey, I think you're asking for something that maybe is not quite right, or you've worded something incorrectly, or this seems a little restrictive. Just because the word's called protest in there, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Once again, we generally have the county lens on how we want to have things done. Does not mean that you as our partners don't have a different or better way of doing something, and we would love to hear that. Once the sourcing event closes, we have a secondary protest, and this is a protest of award or qualification. So if you feel like we have not run our process correctly, you can also message us through that Q&A board or through the central purchasing manager and let us know that you're protesting the award process. And then once the sourcing event is over and you want access to any of those documents, or you have questions about anything, it's back to that public records request where you can contact us to receive those documents.
Thank you, Barry. And we have another question as well. Do all potential proposers see answers to the questions from all sources?
So not during the process. So when you submit your proposal questions in, we keep that all confidential until the evaluators have gone through the process and they've scored all of the items. Once we've scored and then notified proposers of whether they're qualified or awarded, then those are public record. And they can be asked by anybody who participated in the process or any other person to see those answers, with the exception of confidential information. So we have some documents that lay out what confidential information is. And what we would do is redact that confidential information, and then the rest of it would become public record.
Barry, I think the question was about when people ask questions during the procurement process, not the responses. to the-
I apologize. I apologize. So if we get a question and it's really like a process question, like I can't find a document, we obviously don't share those out to everybody. If somebody asks a question that's really like programmatic, or it relates to the process for submitting your information back into the procurement that will impact all of the potential proposers, then we will post that as a question that everybody in the Q&A board can see, and then we will post our response to everyone. But yeah, if you're just asking a specific little procedural question because you're having some difficulties finding something, we generally won't share those out. It's kind of for the greater good. If everybody needs to see that information, it gets shared out. If it's specific to you, it just goes to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that information, Barry. Just so that everyone is aware, we just answered. Can you please go over the process for asking questions? How and when are those questions answered and responded to, as well as do all potential proposers see answers to the questions from all sources? If there aren't any other questions at this time, I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a quick 5-minute stretching break. We have much more information to go over for all of you. And so we will see you all back at, let's say, 11:43. How about 11:43? Does that work for everybody? Okay, see you all soon. Okay, the time is now 11:43. Welcome back, everyone. I will wait for everyone to trickle back in and we will continue on with our presentation. Always great to get a good stretch. Hello, hello. Okay, we are back. And we just finished our first section of our community workshop of contracting with Multco Aging Disabilities Veteran Services, Community Services Division. And we have our RFPQ background we provided in relation to the evolution and how it began with community services and where we're going. We talked about the technical qualifications and uploading to Multco Marketplace, the differences in sourcing events, the difference between RFP and RFPQ, as well as the process relations. And now we're going to pass it over to our great colleague, Lucas Holter of Procurement, to give us an overview of the procurement role, responsibilities, results, and then talk about the qualifying categories. We'll have Lynn to give information about the qualifying categories as well. We'll have Lucas go first, and then we'll have Lynn, and then Lucas again. How about that?
Sounds good. Thank you, Aria. Good morning, everyone. Lucas Helter, he is him, Procurement Analyst Senior for DCHS, and it's my role to help support ADVSD in their creation and building out all the RFPQ or whatever sourcing needs they have. Excuse me. So here at Multnomah County, we are split in the way our procurements are handled. Each department has a contracts and procurement team. It's my role as part of DCHS to help ADVSD and anyone at DCHS build out our events. We do our sourcing work, identifying the needs, identifying the scope and the requirements. We then collaborate with our central purchasing team, who runs a compliance role, and they will help do things like run the event. They will be the central point of contact when the events are opened. They will be the ones to manage the Q&A board. They are your central contact when the event is open. Prior to open, it'll be with us and aging and our teams. So in the early parts of the role is us writing and drafting the documents. Part of those responsibilities include writing the draft of the buyer's attachments and all the items that go with it. It includes writing the questions, the criteria, as well as establishing the process for submission. If that is writing your own document, answering questions in the system, or however we're looking for those proposals to be submitted, that's part of our strategy discussion at the early stage, and seeing how that's going to interact with our e-procurement system marketplace, as we'll talk about quite a bit. We'll then move on to the results side, which is ensuring that the process we ran is in compliance with all of our rules. For an event like this, we're using what's called Per One. It's our human services rule set. Per One is available online if you would like to view something like that. It's not the most exciting document. So we'll, in addition to compliance, we'll confirm that the buyer's attachments we have are all accurate, up to date, and attached to the event for the supplier's review. And then we'll also make sure that the questions and criteria are all there and everything looks good. To kind of give a high level view of what the RFPQ process is anticipated to look like for this round, I say anticipated, as everything we say here is still a little bit in development. So if we say something here today, please make sure it is the same in the RFPQ when it is released. We're still having a few small discussions about how things will work in the flow. But as we understand today, everything I say is how we're planning on making it work. So with the RFPQ, it's a request for programmatic qualifications. Our intent here is to create a pool of qualified suppliers to help us provide the services that will be identified in the ADVSD program model. Through this qualified pool, that is anybody who scores a score of 70% or higher in their respective categories. And each category is evaluated separately. From that pool, we will do an allocation process to allocate funding among those qualified candidates. This is all to say that just because you are awarded into the qualification pool, there's no guarantee of funding or a contract on the later stages. It's up to the ADVSD program team to have those difficult decisions and to decide and make determinations on where the funding will be allocated. So I see we're already in the next slide there. As we understand today, we will be having 4 categories for this: district centers, enhancing equity, evidence-based health promotion, and nutrition. As we do this, each category is a separate submission. So as you answer questions to participate as a district center or an evidence-based health promotion provider, those will be their own service category and require a new submission. We are doing our best to make sure that a lot of the questions that are sort of high-level organizational questions, your administrative capacity, your connections and partnerships, those will have a little bit of cohesion amongst the different categories. So you're not writing a brand new proposal from scratch for each one. We're going to do our best to see that there are some overlap or cohesive questions that you can use information from across categories. You may apply to any or all categories. If you only want to provide nutrition services, you only have to apply for nutrition services. You can ignore the other categories. If you want to apply for services in all 4 categories, we will be asking for a submission in each individual category. And to give you an idea of what that would look like, for our events when they are posted online, each event is presented with a different group of sections or different web pages within the event. Some of these will have the event description. It might have buyer's attachments. The Q&A board is one of these, and there is also a section for questions. The questions will be divided into 4 pages. Each page represents a category, and we will have instructions and clarity of titles when it's released. And again, this will all be covered in the pre-proposal conference in much greater detail with examples. But to give you an idea today, each page would have a question for you to upload your proposal, which is written on your own form. PDF is preferred because it's a nice, consistent document for people to review. And then below there, we will have the different questions that we want to see addressed in that proposal. So you're not entering your proposal in the system and typing it out to each question. You'll be writing it on your own proposal and attaching it to one single question.
And we'll give more of that information as we dive into the questions criteria and uploading to MMP, right, Lucas?
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and give it over to Lynn to give us a overview, high level of each one of those qualifying categories. Lynn?
Thank you. So just to provide a little bit of clarification, looking at these 4 different packets as Lucas had described them, true to our model in the last RFPQ and carrying forward into this one, for the district centers, that is the category where we will be awarding 1 award per district center. We are broken up into different areas of Multnomah County. The district center areas are the west side, northeast, southeast, mid-county, and east county. And so we will award 1 agency in each of those district center catchment areas. It could be a collaboration, it could be a consortium, that would be up to you and writing your proposal, but there will be 1 award per district throughout Multnomah County. And those contract amounts are determined based on our funding formula, which looks at a variety of things, including the demographics of older adults and adults with disabilities living in those areas. Now, thinking about the enhancing equity or the culturally specific category, that is where agencies can select from a menu of services and write their proposal. And we will be awarding 38% of our funding for these enhancing equity or culturally specific providers. And this is where we will award a number of contracts based on those that qualified and contract negotiations and discussions that we have with qualified entities once the RFP closes and is scored, and we have our pool of qualified agencies. Health promotion is another standalone service. And so this is where we will have a split of 62% for culturally responsive organizations and 38% of our funding for culturally specific or enhancing equity contracts. And so this pool of funding is for evidence-based health promotion classes and workshops throughout the community based on the funding we receive as an area agency on aging in contract with the state of Oregon. And then our nutrition contracts, and this is for Older Americans Act funded programming for home delivered and congregate meals. And again, we will be using our funding split of 62% for culturally responsive and 38% for culturally specific or enhancing equity nutrition programs. And again, this funding is through the Older Americans Act and is for home delivered and congregate meal programming. And so those are kind of gives a good idea of the different packets. And as Lucas said, an agency might apply for one area, one packet, or across several packets. And each will be scored independently. And then everything that is not the district centers, we will then have conversations to determine which agencies we are going to contract with and for which services.
Thank you so much for that overview, Lynn. I think that we can all say that we now have a little bit more understanding of the procurement role, responsibilities, and results, right? As well as the qualifying categories for this community services RFPQ for older adults. At this time, we'll give you a little bit more insight and transparency into the evaluator criteria. Everybody wants to know, how is this evaluated and what do the proposal reviewers look at? At this time, I'm going to have the lovely Marina Kalina give you more of an insight to how we are reframing our view of the evaluator criteria. Marina?
Thank you, Aria, and hope everyone can hear me. Just adjusting a little bit my sound here. And well, evaluator criteria. What happened when you submit the application, each application will have a set of questions. So, and each question will be written to include specific criteria. So evaluators, and just like proposers, will be asked to use that criteria as guidance for scoring the proposals. So criteria is generally based on the requirements of the program and what is seen as necessary to be a capable provider of the described services. So this, this can include like ability to engage the community or looking at administrative capacity. Can we go to the next slide? So there's no predetermined weight for each individual criteria. However, each question will have an assigned and known weight for the overall proposal. The county has and continues to trust the independent judgment of the evaluators, the way that they score the proposal based on content of the proposal. And a program representative will be present to answer questions regarding the program model for the evaluation panel and help clarify the program requirements for evaluators. And so if you look at our website, you will see that we are already actively recruiting independent evaluators. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Marina. And I'm happy to say that we are doing a really good job at developing a diverse panel to review and evaluate those proposals as we are going in our direction of more equitable processes here at Multnomah County. So we are grateful to everyone that has really dived in to really support this upcoming RFPQ. At this time, we will have an overview of the question criteria I told you all this was coming back from Lucas. And at this time, Lucas, if you could please show video and let everybody know all of the juicy goods about question criteria.
Yeah, certainly. So when we write out our buyer's attachments, one of those attachments will be your questions and criteria. It's really, really important, and I cannot stress it enough to carefully review those questions and especially the criteria. I tend to advise our programs that when they write these questions and criteria, think about the criteria as the answer to the question. That what we want to see from this is listed in that criteria, and we ask our evaluators the same thing we ask of our suppliers, that we want to judge the contents of the proposal against the criteria listed on those attachments. So as you write out a question, please be certain, and if it helps to print it out and cross off each criteria as you go through it, see that those are in your proposals, because we stress to our evaluation team to judge the proposals strictly on the content of the proposal. We ask them not to bring in outside influence if they know something about an agency or read an article about it, to leave that all behind and to just use the contents of the proposal as provided to dictate the score. They do sit down as a team after they do their preliminary scoring to discuss things they may have missed in a question. If one evaluator says, oh, I thought this question, they did a really good job because I saw X, Y, and Z listed in it, and somebody else missed that, they might raise a score during the meeting in accordance with that. So that's, I will stress that again, like read those questions and criteria, because that is what we use. As you upload each proposal to the question page in the event, below the upload, there will be the questions restated, and we just put them in as a yes or no question to sort of help remind you that, yes, I addressed all these questions in my proposal. What we see at the county as you're doing that, we are locked out from viewing the content of proposals, but we can see that you have marked yes or uploaded an attachment. We can see that you have submitted your response, or maybe you have completed it but not submitted it. We can see that degree of clarity. So when it comes down to that last week, we'll probably have our team go through and see folks who are 100% completed but not submitted. And we'll try and reach out to say, hey, make sure you go in and do the final certification and submission. Because if you have it all in the system and do not submit, as Barry mentioned, when that system closes at 4 o'clock, it is a hard close by the system. And it's the clock of the system, not the clock of your computer, unfortunately. So be mindful of that and give yourself extra time. And again, as Barry said, carefully review those buyer's attachments. We'll have a sample contract in there. Yeah, so that's where I will stress those kind of elements. We don't have exact criteria set today as we're working on that. So I think we can move on to the next slide.
I had a few questions on our chat.
Oh, yes. I can address that. So the timeline for the RFP go live and close, the minimum time we're open is 30 days. We will likely be open for 45. I am hesitant to say 60 days, but we will probably be extending this one beyond the 30-day requirement. So that will all be provided when the RFPQ goes live, but it should be 45, potentially 60 days, but don't hold me to that today. Thank you. And how much are we using consumers and people with lived experience regarding evaluators? ADVSD is doing a large outreach mission to find community members to participate. One of the big things we have to be mindful of as we build our evaluation panels is to remove conflicts of interest. And that's one of the very difficult pieces about having a system of care, is that most of the people who have the best experience or expertise in the system actively work in that system. So we will make sure that folks who are on the evaluation panels don't sit on the board of a supplier who's submitting a response. We'll make sure that there's no other conflicts there, but we do reach out and are trying to bring in a large group. I think the end result we're hoping for is upwards of 8 or more individuals per panel. Through those 8 members and more, we're hoping to get a wide range of lived experiences, of work experiences, of individuals who know the service, know what's required, and can help evaluate the responses based on the content of those proposals.
And for those that are utilizing ASL interpreter services, the question that Lucas Folter just answered was the timeline between RFP and when it goes live and the deadline. The next question says, how much are you using consumers, people with lived experience regarding evaluators? And Lucas also answered that as well for everyone. At this time, we will go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into contracting with Multco. And the question is very direct. How do you contract with Multco? And we will have our colleague now to come forward and give us that information. Again, Lucas.
Thank you again. Yeah, so once the event is closed and we're in our qualification stage, which is where we at the end of the evaluation, we'll have what's called an allocation phase. During allocation is when the county will identify the contractors who will be receiving funding. If you are one of those receiving funding, then comes the legalese side of the thing. So in order to apply to an event, all you have to have is what we call a short form account. It's basically an access to our supplier portal. When you are working towards an executed contract, we go on to what's called the long form supplier account. I think all you'll see is an email from our supplier support team saying it's time to complete your supplier profile. At this stage is when we do the uploads for your insurance documentations, making sure your W-9 is up to date, adding in additional contacts and more business information, all the tax information that we require to process things on our end, all the fiscal requirements, risk requirements are part of that. It's a lot of the stuff that tends to slow down contracting, but we try and capture it in this what we call long form account. And if the insurance is uploaded and up to date, and if all your tax information is clear and up to date, that really helps smooth out the timelining of contracting. If you are one who is awarded funding, you will work with the aging program team and their contract liaisons to collaborate on what that service delivery will look like and what that scope of work will look like in the final contract. We will ask you to review and update documents, and all of it is handled electronically at this stage. It's all done through Marketplace and our Contracts Pro software. We do have a few links here for your supplier guide and how to do business with the county. These are always available online to kind of go in and view some pre-built documents to kind of help understand a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. The main role is to be ready to approve changes to contracts and be ready to understand that when things start moving, we'd like them to move smoothly. We try our best not to be a barrier to timelining to getting contracting done, but there are certain workflow pieces that just take time. Compliance checks, legal review, risk management has to review. So there are a lot of sort of workflow steps that happen behind the scenes, but we do our best to make sure that that happens smoothly. And that's what I have to say about contracting.
Thank you, Lucas, for that great overview of how to contract with Multnomah County. As Lucas stated, we do have a timeline, and we have been asked about what the timeline is. So in order to give you more of a snapshot, here is what we have for you today. As far as we are looking towards the future, May 2023 is when the application phase will occur, which is when the application opens. Multco staff is at that time unable to engage on the proposal questions. So we are offering these community workshops prior to the RFQ application opening in order to give the best and most transparent explanations to any of your questions that you have pre-proposal submission. In July 2023, that's when we will close the application. And then the Multco staff will onboard our evaluation panel, as well as look into all of the different proposals and start the scoring and criteria for qualifying into the pool. Then the second part of that, we will have our evaluation phase. That's when we're going to look a little deeper within our panels, and then we're going to engage on reviewing the proposals, and we'll select the qualified community partners, and then we'll begin what Lucas had hinted on within that allocation phase. And that's where we're trying to figure out what funding is needed. And hopefully we'll have a really good qualified pool that we can select from that will be able to contract with us. And we'll enter in September 2023 into our contracting phase. That's when we'll talk about the statement of work and the established workflows to support that statement of work. And then you're contracting with Multco, and that is our contracting timeline. I want to go ahead and give the floor to either Lucas or to Lynn if I missed any information within that timeline. Lucas or Lynn?
I think that was great.
I think that covers it. And again, during that contracting phase, that's when we're in conversation with the qualified pool. We're talking about scope of work. We're talking about rates. We're talking about all sorts of things. Contracts are scheduled to be in place and service delivery January 1st, 2024. So that gives us the fall and the early part of the winter to get those contracts in place.
Awesome. Thanks, Lynn. At this time, we will talk about the insurance requirements in order to contract with Multco. We want to make sure that we are enhancing all aspects of administrative capacity for potential contractors. And we will have our lovely colleague, Barry, to come and for 20 minutes to talk to us about these insurance requirements. Barry?
Hi, thanks again. So insurance is managed by our risk management department, as Lucas mentioned. Risk management determines the types of insurance that are required and the amount of coverages that are required based on the risk that's associated with the services that we're receiving. During the sourcing event or the RFP process and the contracting process, you will have several opportunities to discuss what those insurance requirements are and to identify what they are. Insurance, really, from a county's perspective, is mostly to ensure that whatever you've agreed on in your contract, if something were to go wrong for any reason, that there's a level of protection financially, both for yourselves as a business and for the county or the clients that are receiving those services, to ensure that we can all continue to do business should something go wrong. In the sourcing event, the RFPQ, you will identify the what we believe are the insurance requirements in attachment A, and that will list out the proposed insurance requirements. And then when you get awarded the sourcing event and you go into contracting, unless you've negotiated some different insurance terms, Exhibit 2 in the contract will identify the insurance that you're actually required to have. The proof of insurance is what's called a certificate of insurance, and Lucas mentioned that you will upload those certificates of insurance that you get from your insurance broker into your sourcing or your supplier profile in Marketplace. The good thing about that is because we collect insurance at a supplier level and not at a contract level, is that if you already have a contract with the county and you've already uploaded those insurance requirements, all we have to do is validate that that's already there. So you may not have to do that additional step if you already have that insurance certificate on file with us. Throughout the life of your contract, it will be a supplier's responsibility to ensure that you're maintaining updated insurance certificates. And one of the tools in our e-procurement system, our electronic marketplace system, is it will notify both you as a supplier and us as contract managers or contract holders of when those insurance certificates are expiring, so we can ensure that they're updated timely. And that's what I really have for insurance. Reach out to risk management or through the program group if you have more questions about that, and we can help identify what those risk or what those insurance requirements should be prior to the sourcing event going out.
That's it?
Insurance is easy.
Well, thanks, Barry. So at this time, I wanted to go ahead and thank all of the speakers that took the opportunity to review such wonderful and valuable information. We talked about the community services RPQ background, contracts evolution, the technical qualifications of Multco Marketplace, sourcing events descriptions, technical qualifications for process relations, procurement role overview and responsibilities, qualifying categories, evaluator criteria, questions criteria in uploading to Multco Marketplace, how to contract with Multco, the contracting timeline, and what are the insurance requirements. We want to give you a moment to ask any additional questions, but before that, please take a moment to complete our brief survey, which is posted in the chat. There is a mini joke about me doubling myself, and I just did. I posted it in the chat while talking to you at the same time. Thank you for completing our survey, and we will make sure to answer any questions that we have in the chat at this time. Also, if you have any colleagues that are not affiliated with submission of a proposal, I'm going to also submit a link for them to be a part of a panel if they are not affiliated with submitting a proposal to Multco County. I'll drop that in the chat for you in just a moment. And Barb, if you have a question, please do drop it in the chat. Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Any idea how many organizations will receive funding?
I can try to tackle that question. So we know we will be awarding for the 5 district centers. So that, again, that's the West Side, North, Northeast, Southeast, Mid County, and East County. So we know we will have that. The number of awards we will do for health promotion will vary based on how many agencies qualify, and then the scope of those qualified agencies, how many health promotion workshops or classes they are wanting to provide each year. And again, using that culturally specific funding split of 38% and culturally responsive of 62% of the funding. I can say the funding in health promotion, the total amount that we allocate out is relatively small. The number of culturally specific organizations that we would contract with for Older Americans Act programming, case management, information and assistance, transportation support, focal point, etc., will vary based on the number of applications we receive and kind of the scope of what is written in those applications. So the number of qualified agencies, that's where we start in conversation. And so whether we decide to contract with 5 culturally specific organizations or 8 or 10, that remains to be seen to again see which agencies have applied, serving what communities and groups and ethnic groups, and how can we best serve the community to make sure that we are reaching accessible services for all. And the same thing for nutrition. Again, 62% of the funding going for culturally responsive agencies and 38% going to culturally specific agencies serving, providing congregate meals and home delivered meals. And so we don't know, it will depend on how many agencies qualify, and then looking at the scope of services that they have written in their proposals to make sure that we are allocating all the funding out, reaching all areas of the county, and also cultural and ethnic groups as well. So it is hard to know how many. You can look at our current public facing website to see who our current partners are, to get an idea of how many agencies we currently contract and partner with for these different service areas.
Thank you, Lynn. Am I unmuted? Hopefully I am. Oh, perfect. Barb, I went ahead and unmuted you. If you can
Thank
ask a question.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. My voice sucks too, but I wanted to first say you guys are doing an amazing job with this presentation. It's really well done. So my question actually comes from advocacy, and I've done some of these before, and sometimes everything doesn't get submitted like it should, like a budget, for example. And you guys are talking about, you know, checking to make sure if it's done, that it's submitted. Would the budget fall into that category too? Because I see that as one of the ways that these things end up not being fair, I guess, sometimes. And thank you for unmuting me, and I hope I made any sense.
Thank you so much for that, Barb. So the question was surrounding advocacy. For those who weren't able to hear clearly, sometimes everything does not get submitted, is what Barb was mentioning, and wants to know, does the budget fall into that category as well?
Want me to take that? Want me to take that one?
If you see there's typing, I'm doubling and tripling. So now I'm submitting, I guess, as Jessica Gushlak. Thanks, Jessica.
I'll do my best to answer that. So when you read through the sourcing event, it will tell you what the required items are to submit. If budget is one of those items, you will either have an attached form that you will fill out that will add any budget detail, or they'll ask for you just to submit it on whatever Excel spreadsheet or documentation that you might use. If you don't submit it with your proposal and it's a required document to turn in, that is something that could either impact your score or impact your ability to participate in the event. If you submitted it, if there's some level of clarification, like you believe you submitted something and maybe there was a problem with the file or something, we do have the ability to come back to you and say, ask for clarification. And in some of those cases, and it varies depending on what happens, we can ask to have that submitted. If it's not required as part of the sourcing event, meaning you don't have to submit it to participate and you don't have to submit it to have it scored, then that could be asked for at the time of contracting. And that would be just information that would assist the program in developing contract content. So it kind of depends, but there are some avenues to get that in if it's not submitted properly the first time.
Thank you so much for that information, Barry, and hopefully that did answer your question, Barb. If you have a colleague that you know might be interested in serving on our evaluation panel that is not affiliated with submitting a proposal that will give us a non-biased but a equitable perspective on these proposals with any type of subject matter background in proposal review, we ask that you please send them our way to be considered to be on our evaluation panel. Though they might not be selected, if there is a conflict of interest, we do want to have a diverse, qualified pool of panels and proposals. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our contracting with Multco #1. We did it, and we talked about a lot of great information today. Please do follow us on our webpage. I will also drop that link in the chat as well for us to be able to engage surrounding our next workshop, which is coming up in March. We look forward to talking about the administrative needs in our second workshop. And then our third workshop, we'll talk about equity and contracting. Thank you all and be well.